couple of days later, it's in the papers. ASPCA busts the largest cockfight in New York City history. So I come into work and my sergeant's looking at the paper and he goes, "Is this?" I said, "Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about." Instead of keeping his mouth shut, he walks in and tells the lieutenant, who now throws he has a shit fit, and he goes,
"Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?"
Great, Ray. How are you?
Fitz, today we have a guest on the show by the name of Vic Ferrari. Vic is a retired NYPD detective with the Auto Crimes Division. He's also an author and a host of the NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast. Vic, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining.
Ray Fitz, thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Vic, you're not just an author, but I count 9 books. Is that right?
Yeah, I average about a book a year.
That's called prolific, I think, either reading or writing. Good for you. I like the covers, too.
Thank you. I lucked out. I've got a company that I work with that I give them an idea and they create it for me.
Well, again, welcome to Cold Red, and we want to hear all about you. Could you give us a little bit of your background, or as much as you want, actually, how you got into police work and law enforcement and where you grew up, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Bronx kid, lower middle class family, Catholic high school. By 5, I knew I wanted to become a New York City police detective. I grew up watching The French Connection, The 7-Ups, The Rockford Files. My path was law enforcement. When I was a little boy, my mother would take me to the movie theater. Around the block was a precinct. I was more interested in the police cars and the way the cops interacted outside around the station house. By 10 or 11 years old, my friends used to sneak into the post office and steal the FBI wanted posters off the walls. And then we would go around the neighborhood conducting manhunts, trying to see if we could find the guy. And some poor guy's trying to get a sandwich in a deli. There's a bunch of 10-year-old boys looking at, Billy Ray Smith wanted for a bank robbery in Louisiana. By 20, I took the entrance exam for the NYPD. By 21, and through the police academy, had a great 20-year career with the NYPD, worked in a lot of different units. 15 out of my 20 years, I was in plainclothes. I worked in an anti-crime unit, which is pickpockets, burglaries, robberies. I was in the Manhattan North Narcotics Division for a while. My last 10, I was a detective in the NYPD's auto crime divisions, changing vehicle identification numbers for resale, shipping vehicles out of the country, chop shops, that sort of thing. Retired from the NYPD in 2007, moved down to Florida, put out of my mind, got into writing. I've written a series of books, and then I started the NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast.
Well, that was a succinct. I think our years, I was in FBI 87 to 07, and I retired. Then I was a police officer 11 years before that. But my first squad was supposed to be, I think, the truck theft squad in Brooklyn, Queens. I think the FBI had one. It was a task force. But long story short, they put me on a bank robbery squad. But we could have been working together back in the day, but it didn't quite work out exactly that way.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Safe Loft and Truck.
There you go. And I was commuting from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and luckily the people there said, coming into Lower Manhattan is one thing. Going out to Brooklyn, Queens with the squad you just mentioned, that would be a little too much. So luckily I just chased bank robbers instead of car thieves.
Go ahead, Fitz.
I just say I caught my share of car thieves as a police officer, but I didn't do much work with that as an agent. Ray, were you involved in any of that in Philly or Buffalo?
Yeah, actually in Buffalo and then in Philly. And Vic and I were talking about that. I said, I'm shocked we didn't cross paths because I was with the Eastern Auto Theft Task Force. It was a task force that I was running with local law enforcement, state police, and, of course, the Bureau. And our group also got involved in bank robberies. But we were talking about some of the things, and this is not about me, but it's about you, Vic. And I really like to know, when you look at all the things you've done and the precincts you've been in, you started in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 87.
Right. So when you look at the 80s and the culture in NYPD, and then you left in what, 2005, 6, 7? So you left after 20 years, you left 2007. Did the culture really change a lot for you?
Oh, absolutely. When I first got hired, New York City was a mess. As far as crime, I mean, we were averaging over 2,500 homicides a year. There was 150,000 stolen cars a year in the 5 boroughs. And in those days, as a young cop, if you came in off the street with someone smoking marijuana or a guy with a bag full of crack, they would get upset with you. It's like, get this guy out of the station house, give him a DAT, a desk appearance ticket, don't do that again because you're taking a car off the street. That all changed in 92, 93 when Giuliani came around because, as you guys know, he was a former prosecutor at the Southern District. So he put together a team of guys, Bratton and Maples, and basically we targeted quality of life crimes. And that took a lot of bad guys off the playing field. So the NYPD started taking crime seriously as opposed to just babysitting.
And I think that babysitting modality is a problem right now in many large cities in this country. And we can maybe end up with that. But we're sticking with you for now, Vic, in your early days.
Yeah, go ahead, Vic.
No, just nowadays it's kind of morphed into report taking. Show up after the fact. Don't put your hands on anybody. Take the report. And if we get them, great. If we don't get them, great. Just the way it is, unfortunately.
Well, looking back over those 20 years with the NYPD, what would you say is your most challenging investigation or your most challenging moment on the job?
There were a lot. Sometimes it was the department that got in the way. Sometimes it would be prosecutors that would get in the way. Different boroughs had different rules for prosecuting the same exact thing. Manhattan, for us, was the crown jewel. You brought them a good case and you wanted to go up on a wiretap or you needed a subpoena, they'd work hand in glove with you. Boroughs like the Bronx and Brooklyn, not so much. So it was, but you pick your battles, right? You get the answer sometimes, and sometimes it's the answer you don't want to hear and you move on with it. You can only go around something so many times before you get into trouble. And I was a firm believer with supervisors or prosecutors, just ride the wave. You're not going to be working for this guy or with this person forever. Eventually, you'll get a better supervisor. Eventually, you'll find a better prosecutor, and you move on from there.
And hopefully the statute of limitations hasn't expired if you wanted to arrest that guy from a few years before.
That's true.
Here's the thing. I was checking you out, some of the books. I'm sure Jimmy did too. And what I found is that you're not as serious as you come off at. You have a great sense of humor. Tell me about that.
I like to think so. And when I got into writing these books, I didn't want to come across as, I've read books by other members of law enforcement and they're kicking ass and taking names, and that's great. But if you worked in law enforcement long enough, you can see the bravado, and nobody wants to hear that after a while. You kind of sound like, a bunch of drunk cops in a bar carrying on about the good old bad days. I kind of wanted to show my sense of humor and show the ridiculousness of things that would happen sometimes on the job that people wouldn't believe. So, yeah, I guess my sarcasm and sense of humor does bleed into my writing.
Well, give us a little example. Give us a little teaser.
Of a story that's funny?
Well, yeah, whatever you want, wherever you want to go with it, Vic.
So it's probably, I got a couple of years to go. We had a lieutenant that was, he was always the kid looking inside, wanting to get in. He wanted a press conference. He wanted a big case. And I had come up, and I worked in auto crime. I had a series of arrests that had nothing to do with auto crime. Like one time I walked into a bodega to grab a soda. I looked out, they had all this gambling stuff laying around. Made the arrest. Another time I made a gun collar. So one time he pulled me in his office. He goes, stick to auto crime. You got it, boss. My sergeant comes up to me a couple of days later and says, we're getting killed with these Vespa motor scooters. They're getting swiped all over the place from the Upper East Side because all these hipsters were buying them, leaving it in the street, and they're vanishing. So I started running the plates of the Vespas that was stolen. I find out that one was recovered with an arrest up in the South Bronx in the 4-4 precinct. So my logic is probably it's a bunch of teenagers that are going shopping in the Upper East Side. I'll go up to this neighborhood, and it's going to be the kids driving around in these stolen Vespas. I'll pick off a couple, make a couple of arrests, close this thing out. Go up to the neighborhood, don't see a Vespa. So what winds up happening is I says, all right, you know what? I'll bet you they're in the basement of these 6-story walk-ups where the super has his snow shovels and motorcycles. So one by one, I'm going into these basement apartments. I'm knocking on the door, and each super one can't be more cooperative than the next. They love showing me their underground lair, and I'm seeing snow shovels and tires and all sorts of crap. The last building we go to, I bang on the door and I smell marijuana, and I hear laughing, hysterical laughing. The door opens and the super is about 4 feet tall. He looks like Tattoo from Fantasy Island with slick back hair. His eyes are glazed and he's just looking at me like I'm the Messiah. And I'm trying to explain to him, I know he understands me. You know, I'm speaking English. I know he understands me. And he's like, okay. And he's shaking. So we go to this common area and this, like a partition door with an asp on it and a lock. And he's dropping the keys. And I'm like, what is he so damn nervous about? And he opens up this room. He pulls across these sliding doors. He puts on the light. And I kid you not, there's probably 50 chickens and hens, 50 roosters and hens running around on the floor. And then stacked in pods against the wall is another 50. So this is a breeding ground for cockfighting. I mean, I don't work for the ASPCA, but so I got my lieutenant in my back of my ear stick to auto crime, but I know this is going to be something. So I said, okay, Poppy, just lock it up. And he goes, it's okay. I says, yeah. Do you have Vespa motor scooters? Yeah, no. I says, okay. So we leave. So I get on the phone. I call my sergeant. I go, listen, get the cavalry down here. I'm going to get a search warrant. I've got this thing. He goes, what did the lieutenant tell you? I said, this is going to be big. He likes press conferences. Trust me. He goes, he went home for the day. He goes, call the ASPCA. So I don't know if you guys know, but there's the ASPCA police, and they go out and lock people up for cruelty to animals. So I reach out to them. I hand it to them, and they're ecstatic. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. And the guy says, if we get a warrant with this, I'm going to reach out to you. I says, go with God. A couple of weeks later, the guy calls me up. It's my day off. And he says, we got this warrant. This is going to be huge. I says, no, I'm helping my dad put up a fence. Thank you, but no thanks. A couple of days later, it's in the papers. ASPCA busts the largest cockfight in New York City history. So I come into work and my sergeant's looking at the paper and he goes, is this? I said, yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about. Instead of keeping his mouth shut, he walks in and tells the lieutenant, who now throws he has a shit fit. And he goes, Vic, what happened? I go, you told me to stick to auto crime.
Did he even get did he get a dozen eggs out of this thing?
Had absolutely nothing.
There was it wasn't even a golden egg there for you, right? There was a golden egg there. Vic, that's unbelievable. So looking back on your career, if you had to pick one case that was the most memorable working up in New York, what would that be?
I worked on a case, I believe it started in 99 and it went into the end of 2000. We were losing about 30 Audi A6s a month. They were just vanishing off the face of the earth. And they weren't turned up, chopped anywhere. They weren't getting recovered with arrests. We weren't finding the bones anywhere. So we knew they were being shipped. And then we started hearing from outside agencies, Jersey, Westchester County, they're losing Audis at an alarming rate. So what winds up happening is we find out that the New York State Police recovered one of the cars. And I kept calling this guy up and he's not getting back to me. So I know the New York State Police are holding on to something. So what winds up happening is a guy gets popped in the Palisades Mall up in Rockland County stealing a BMW. He's on lifetime parole down in Florida for something. We go up there to interview him. When we show up, it's the New York State Police, the Westchester District Attorney's Office. So now we're all like, okay, we're all smiling at each other. What do you got? What do you got? What do you got? And this guy tells us chapter and verse that there's these Chinese nationals out in Brooklyn, and they hook up with a Jamaican middleman in the Bronx. The Jamaican middleman in the Bronx hires steal teams to steal these Audi A6s, and he pays between $500 and $1,000 an Audi. The cars have to be silver and black. If you steal a car that's another color, they don't want it. We find out later on they're going to government officials. So what winds up happening through Janine Pirro in the Westchester County DA's office, we go up on the Asians' phones, we go up on the car thieves' phones, and what we quickly figure out, they're stealing these cars, they're parking them in the street, they're letting them cool off, they bring them out to Brooklyn, they go into this warehouse. Inside the warehouse are more Chinese guys, and what they do is they fix the ignitions, they clean the car, they want them in showroom condition. They'll drive a car into a container, they let the air out of the tires so it sits low, then they'll build a wooden frame above it, they'll hoist up a second Audi, and put two stolen Audis per shipping container. Then what they do is they created a bogus manifest, and they had a legit trucking company take the Audis out to New Jersey, out to Newark. They got put on trains. They got railed out to Long Beach, California, put on cargo ships, and they were sent to Shanghai. So while we're in the middle of this international stolen vehicle case, on the wiretaps, we quickly figure out that our thieves are in the murder for hire business. And they're talking about they whacked this guy, they whacked that guy. So, I mean, there's so many facets of this case. We can go on all night about it. But eventually when we took down the case, we figured out the main guy, the Chinese guy, was a Chinese military intelligence guy. They said retired, but you're not retired from the CCP. And we wound up closing out probably about 13 to 15 homicides as a result of that case.
Nice.
Is that Min Jin Yang?
That's Min Jin Yang, yeah. Well, he went by the name Ken, but yeah.
Did he wind up going to prison, or is there some kind of a deal with the embassy?
No, he did about 10 years for enterprise corruption, and I don't know if he was deported after that.
Were they also the killing people, or were that the Jamaicans?
It
or
was
both?
The murders specifically were the thieves, which was Spanish and black. There was a homicide during that case in Atlantic City, New Jersey, that we could never figure out if they were involved in. The Asians.
That's an amazing, I mean, the time, effort, and money they spent, including rail transportation across the continent, and then get it shipped off to China. I mean, I guess in the long run, though, they still got a good deal in the car somewhere in Shanghai or wherever you said it was, and that's what the bosses were driving over there, the government cars, as you said.
Yeah, and they were paying Ian Dedrick, the middleman, $5,000 a car, and most of the thieves were getting $500. His main thief, this guy Mario Lopez, who was a master thief. I mean, I never saw a guy with a work ethic like this in any criminal in my life. He was getting paid $1,000 a car.
That's amazing. We used to have a train station in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. I was a police officer, Cornwalls Heights train station, SEPTA Amtrak line. Anyway, we were getting cars out of there every other day, stolen, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. And I would sit up in a billboard with binoculars, and I'm about 50 feet above the ground and about 100 feet from the parking lot. And there's some amateurs, of course, as you know, that just break a window, then, screwdrivers. But there are some people within 30 seconds. Maybe that was the name of the movie, right? 30 seconds and gone or something. But these guys were good, and we were starting picking them off left and right. And a lot of them didn't talk because those cars were going somewhere else, and there was a bigger enterprise, probably the mob back in those days. This would be the late 70s, early 80s in the Philadelphia area. But that's an amazing story. And yeah, obviously cars are still being stolen. I always thought I had a theory, I think others said it too, not just me, but the cars started getting more difficult to steal with technology. And that's when the rash of carjacking started in a lot of your big cities and all. And that's a whole different type of crime, of course. And there can be injuries, if not, murders when those things take place. Would you have been involved in carjacking types of situations in the city?
It was, I mean, that hit, carjacking was big in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
It kind of died down for a while. And you're right, vehicle theft, I mean, the more difficult it is to steal a car, some guys are going to think outside the box and use violence. But thank God, I mean, we had a couple of cases with carjackings, but not too much after the 90s. It kind of died down because crime was down so much in the 5 boroughs.
I remember I broke one guy, and he was a car thief, and he told us a bunch of stuff. And you may or may not agree with this, Vic, with your experience. But remember those old clubs you used to you wrap around your brake and the steering wheel? He said, you know what? I can steal just about any car, but that's going to take me like 2 extra minutes to do. I skipped those cars. So as soon as he told me that, I went out and bought a club for my car. And of course, as everyone knows, if they want your car, they'll get it. If they want to get diamonds out of the Louvre, they're going to get them. But the point is, at least these semi-pros and the amateurs may skip your car if you have one of those clubs. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, the more difficult you make it to steal a car or a kill switch, the guy gets in the car, he can defeat it, but why? His only overhead is getting caught. There's another black Nissan Maxima with Bose speakers that he wants. He'll just, like you said, the club, pain in the ass. I mean, they would cut the steering wheel and just move the club off it because it's easier to cut the steering wheel than the club. But yeah, it will slow guys down.
Speaking of the kill switch, I like where some police departments, I don't think they do this anymore, but they would have I don't know, a decoy car set up, like a nice one, and it was designed to just go about 100 feet, then the doors lock and it shuts off. Did NYPD do anything innovative like that at any point in your career?
We had a Mercedes. I know the Auto Crime Division had a Mercedes that would lock the bad guys inside, but I think eventually it depended on the borough, and some of these boroughs did not they felt it was entrapment. So it just wasn't worth the time to do it if you're going to lock somebody up for that and they're going to walk.
and it's so not
Was it
entrapment legally.
was
But
was
anyway,
it entrapment because the car locked with the guy in it and it trapped
I
him?
never had a case with that, but I remember they were pissed because they invested in that car and it went nowhere. And then what's funny is we would use it for surveillance, and sometimes the detectives couldn't figure out how to get out of the car, and then they'd have to call the guy that knew the code to get them out of the car. So it was a big pain.
No, we had the other things we talked about, Vic. I rolled up on a auto body shop outside of Philadelphia in a suburb in a city called Chester, which is just a mess. But there's all kinds of stuff going on there. The cops a lot of people say they're corrupt. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them they said they were. I'm not going to speak to that. But I was able to flip this auto body guy who was, having stolen cars coming in, and he was using the parts to fix real cars that were damaged. He would say, hey, I need this, I need that. And he would take the car apart. And you have all these car parts, and they were easy to trace, to the point where we started a Group 1, it's like an undercover operation where now the FBI was running the shop, and we only ran it, we let him conduct his business. We only ran it from 5 to 2 in the morning. So we were like second shift. So we come in there, and guys were bringing us cars in that were stolen. And, over a period of time, we just said, yeah, we'll get it to you. And we must have locked up 40 or 50 people that did that. They just brought stuff into us. It was easy. It was easy. It's like taking candy from a baby.
Yeah, I'm one of your agents did a case with a detective in my office, similar in the Bronx. There was a scrap metal processor where the guy got busted for selling huge amounts of marijuana, but he also had a scrap metal processor. And they had FBI agents and NYPD detectives in the scrap metal processor. And just as you said, people are bringing in stolen boats and stolen cars. And
it's good stuff. Here's something I want to ask you. I mean, look, you were a cop for 20 years, and you've been out for over 20 years. What inspired you to start writing after retirement? Was it something you always wanted to do?
I was bored out of my mind. I didn't know what to do with myself. I moved down to Florida, foolishly became a police officer down here, and it's a young man's game. And I went from being a detective in America's largest police department working on organized crime, and now it's back to the DUIs and the domestics. I'm like, what did I get myself involved in? It's a young man's game. So I quickly got out of that, and through friends and family, there's like, you got all these stories, and you know how to tell a story. Why don't you write a book? And I really, most all my friends are cops, and I was like, I don't want to embarrass anybody. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I don't want to get anybody divorced. So I said, if I can do this right without hurting anybody or embarrassing anybody, I'm going to do it. And I was really nervous. I mean, I'll never forget, just before I uploaded that on the Amazon platform, I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Like, is this going to come back to haunt me? And everyone reaches out. You should write about this and you should write about that. So it's been positive for me. And I was just bored, and I decided to do it, take a shot.
Yeah. One of the things when you do that is, confidentiality. And I know Fitz, has dealt with that numerous chapters in his books. I also have the Bureau's real big on that, because unlike you, any book that Fitz and I write has to go down to the FBI, and it has to be approved before we can send it to print. And if they don't like something that's in the book, they say, take it out. And you can kind of, and they did that to me, and they did it to Jim. But when you look at this and you want to be honest, but how do you balance honesty with confidentiality when you're writing about people and cases?
And real quick, Vic, did the NYPD have any kind of a rule or restriction about pre-publication?
That I know of, and I'm on my 9th book, and no one has said anything to me since, so I'm just going to keep going until I run out of stories. As far as confidentiality is concerned, again, I didn't want to cause anybody any problems. There are stories I can't write. When I get to the target, I change the names. It's never the person's name. I change the rank, sometimes the sex, the location, the borough they worked in. You got to remember, I worked all over the place. I'm pretty good at, guys know who I'm talking about. People, in the know, like, I know who you're talking about, or, well, that's not 100%. And I'm like, yeah, but it's close enough. I mean, I change a lot of things. It's not verbatim. Like we were talking earlier, you wrote the book about that bank robber. It's about that bank robber. Mine are just short stories about things that happened on my time on the job.
Well, before you go to Jim, when you're on the job, what's been the reaction from some of the NYPD guys that you've written about? Any pushback from anybody?
No, a couple of my old partners laughed. They called, like, I know what you're talking about. I know you're talking about me. And I'm like, you're crazy. It's like, come on. But no, I have not. I have not received any negative pushback at all. I try to keep it as light as possible.
Vic, back in the day, did you read any Joseph Wambaugh, Choir Boys, Onion Field? Because he had a great sense of humor. He's a former LAPD officer, and he wrote some very interesting books.
I did not read the books, but I saw all the movies.
Okay. Yeah, I enjoyed his book. Remember, I read The Choir Boys before I was a police officer in college, and then like 5 years in, I still had it on my bookshelf, and I read it again. I had a whole different take on it because, of course, I'm now and I was a suburban Philly. It wasn't NYPD, but we were still busy enough with stuff like that. So, but I definitely had a different perspective looking at him then. Before we move on, I know you worked some other big cases. I want to ask you about one of them. But Vic, what always fascinated me in some of my training about car thievery, if you will, I won't say it's a science, but there's definitely a system behind vehicle identification numbers. And I'm sure you know what basically every single digit in that number means something. I mean, I think the last 6 are just for that car, perhaps, but everything else is where, the date, and the time, and they're hidden all over the car. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how that all came about? I just find that so fascinating.
I think after 1981, it used to be a 13-character VIN. I think after 1981, it's a 17-character alphanumeric. And you're right, number that's supposed to be on a dashboard. Different vehicles, depending on the manufacturer, will have hidden VIN numbers stamped on engines, transmissions. Some vehicles have airbag numbers. I mean, I don't want to give away too many trade secrets, but you're right. Vehicles have a multitude of hidden vehicle identification numbers or numbers that are cross-referenceable through National Insurance Crime Bureau or NICB. And that's to help law enforcement find these cars and get them back to their owners and build cases against people that steal vehicles, change the vehicle identification number for resale, or chop the parts and, like you said, to repair other cars.
Yeah, just like it's illegal to change tags on a car, maybe a traffic violation, but if they're stolen tags, could be a criminal. You can't mess with VINs either, and that's almost every state. I think that's against the law. I mean, some charge about that. I mean, even I think in Pennsylvania, there are even certain tools that you couldn't carry. People couldn't carry. They're considered, car theft tools or something like that. I'm not sure how that played out, but anything you could possibly get to help get these guys. I used to work in a mall too, and the Chamonix Mall just about ready to close. I think Ray, you've probably been there or know of it in Ben Salem, PA. And it was a very crowded and busy in the 70s, 80s. Probably the mall that you described where the guy was caught, Palisades, I think you said.
Yeah, Palisade Mall.
And a lot of car thievery was out of there. I'll never forget sitting in this little spot I used to sit, plain clothes, unmarked car. I see a guy with kind of distinctive red hair get off the bus. Oh, okay. Looks like another Irishman, like me, although I don't have red hair. Anyway, 2 hours later, on dispatch, a report of a stolen car in the Chamonix Mall. I go over. There's that guy giving a report about his car being stolen, and here it was a fake theft report. And I actually had a colleague who was involved in this too. He picked up on some of that. One of my plainclothes buddies. So that does happen too sometimes. People do fake reports, obviously for insurance purposes. They sell them somehow. The cars, they get cash. Oh my goodness, my car was stolen. Report to the police. They also get insurance. It's a whole scam thing going. And that's probably, you probably charge people with that too, of course.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of insurance fraud in the 5 boroughs. Just as you said, people there were various ways. They would give it to a chop shop. They knew a guy. Yeah, Uncle Joe will make the car disappear. Just give me a week to make it vanish. We used to have that all the time. We put up a pole camera in front of a place. You watch the cars go in, and then 30 days later, they report it stolen. Another scam was they would go to these 24-hour parking lots, just park the car, report it stolen. No one's going to recover that car in 30 days. They'd get their check, and then we would come through the parking lot, run the plate, car comes back stolen. Then we'd start interviewing the parking attendants, you have surveillance footage. When did the car come in? So yeah, that used to happen all the time.
But would just spend more time earning money legally than they do
I'll tell you a
illegally.
funny story. One time there was a shipping container on Gun Hill Road in the Bronx, and I see a Montero going in with New York plates on it. And I run the plates, doesn't come back stolen. And I'm asking the guy a bunch of questions. And apparently the shipper gets on the phone, and the guy owned a restaurant around the corner. It was a Greek guy, and the car's being shipped to Greece. And I go, you're shipping this car to Greece, and you still got the plates on the car. You sell a car in New York State, you got to surrender those plates. They got to get turned in, or they'll suspend your license if those plates are out there. No, I'm just shipping it there for the summer. I'm going to use it. I'm going to bring it back. I'm like, okay. Wrote everything down. I says, this car gets reported stolen. And I'm sure I screwed up his plan. I didn't have him, but, the shipper tipped him off, and he came over and started kicking up a fuss. But he was a guy that owned a diner around the block. But of course he was going to report it stolen. Ships their car to Greece for the summer.
Yeah, with New York tags on it.
It happens all the time, don't it, Vic?
No.
Like the summer, I said, it's just like you shipping it down to the Jersey Shore, right? Everything for the summer. Well, I'm pretty impressed with the 9 books you've written. I see some behind you that you have on the shelf back there. Which book or story are you most proud of? Personally most proud of?
Each book's probably got 30 or 40 stories in it. I'll tell you what, the book I'm most proud of has nothing to do with the NYPD. It's called Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. And that's me growing up being a little son of a bitch in the Bronx and going off to Catholic high school. And I didn't want to go. We were Catholic, but we didn't even go to mass. And my dad was like, no, if I send you to public school, you're going to be a bigger clown than you already are. Pick a school run by the men in black. And I didn't want to go. I went kicking and screaming. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school in the Bronx. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. So that would be the book I'm most proud of.
Nice.
And it was my path to the NYPD.
Funny, Vic, that was my first book. I wrote 4, and that was from 6 years of age, solving my first vehicle theft. It was my bike, and then it ended up with graduating the State Police Academy. I wrote that was Confessions of a Catholic High School Grad your last book, or was that early on?
No, I wrote it about 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, it's fun going over those years, and with priests and nuns. I went to Catholic school too. I know Rick did, and there's a lot of stories. That's a whole era that's long gone. When you remember the nuns or the priests would slap you in the face or beat you up. If you came home and told your parents back then, your parents would slap you and beat you up a second time. So you just hid that from them. Nowadays there'd be lawsuits, lawyers, you name it.
Yeah, it was a different time. And the book, chronicles me growing up in the Bronx and organized crime that was in my neighborhood. You didn't know who these people were. There's a story in there. My parents sent me out to sell raffle tickets for high school, because if you sold raffle tickets, they would deduct it from your tuition. And we didn't have any money. And my mother was like pushing me out the door. We'll sell these raffle tickets. And at first my friend and I started going into the Irish bars. And all the guys would throw us a buck, and we would sell the raffle tickets. And then we couldn't go to the Irish bars anymore. And there was this mob social club, but we didn't know. And we walk in there, and, it's a different vibe. It's really dark. The bartender's yelling at us. The bartender throws me a 20, and I go, what's your name? He goes, Ronald fucking Reagan. Get out of here. So then I turn to walk away, and another guy grabs me by the cheek and squeezes my cheek. He gives me a 20. So I walk out of there with $40 with no names on these raffle tickets. So I started filling them out. I wanted a basket of cheer. I didn't know what a basket of cheer was because I was 14 years old. So I started filling them out, Vic Ferrari, with our address. So I come home, and my mother's thrilled. Yeah, he's a salesman. Look at this. My father knows me. He knows I'm apt to taking shortcuts. So my father picks up the book, and he sees my name 40 times, and he goes, get down here. And I says, well, I sold them. Well, who'd you sell them to? I says, well, at the bar. Bar? You're not allowed to go in bars. And what bar? And I told him, he goes, what are you, out of your mind? He goes, you want to get your throat cut? Tears hang out in there. He goes, no, that's it. That's it. No more raffle tickets.
That's how Henry Hill started in Godfather, Goodfellas, I think.
Very similar, yeah.
Yeah, very similar. Well, here I got to ask you this question. Is there a story from your time on the job that could only have happened in New York City and nowhere else?
All of them. I mean, just the ridiculousness. It's funny. When I became a cop down in Florida, it was like I landed from another planet. Like, they were looking at me like I was crazy, because the things we did in New York, they don't do down here in Florida. And the verbiage was different. I remember coming out of a Walmart for the small police department. I had an arrest and I said I had one under. They interpreted it as I ran somebody over with a police car, and they started sending, ambulances and paramedics showed up. I'm like, one under arrest. We'll say one under arrest. So, NYPD, it's got its own vibe. It's got its own culture. All the stories are just, I don't know how the Bureau works. The NYPD, and I'm sure a lot's changed. I'm out 18 years. But, the NYPD was its own biosphere, its own entity.
I worked on the bank robbery task force for 4 years, and some great NYPD detectives. Learned so much from them. The NYPD is larger than like half the countries in the world military, 35,000 at last count. And I hope they're still recruiting people and good people. Don't know where things will go in the next year or so. But can I bring you back? Because I read some up on you, Vic, and a lot of car stuff here I know you talked about. But there seems something separate from that. And I'm not sure exactly how you got involved. But there's a case of a man named Christian Tarantino.
Yeah, I met this Manhattan district attorney, was a heavy hitter. Homicides for decades he used to prosecute in Manhattan DA's office. And I was a specialist for him. He had a case with some guy was cutting through a parking lot in Lower Manhattan. The owner of the parking garage stopped the guy. The guy gets out of the car, punches the guy in the face. Guy falls back and kills him. And the guy had all these titles and VIN numbers. So he asked me to dig up as much as I could on the guy, and I got a search warrant for a car in upstate New York that was bad. He wanted to build a case on him. So we had this really great working relationship. Bill was how can I describe Bill? Very eccentric. And one day he reached out to me and he said, I need you to find somebody for me. And I says, well, a witness, because sometimes he would call me to find a witness if I wasn't doing anything. And I said, yeah, witness. He goes, no, he's a suspect in a homicide. What are you talking about? And he says, and he starts explaining it to me. And I said, well, you've got Manhattan South homicide looking for him. And basically this guy was I'll go into the whole thing. So you had these group of guys from Long Island that were into everything. They were into steroids. They were into armed robberies. They were robbing armored cars. They robbed an armored car about 10 years before. And in the commission of this armored car robbery, this guy, Christian Tarantino, Louis Dorvell, and another guy, they kill one of the guards. So now, robbing a bank brings in the FBI, and now you kill somebody. This is never going to end. So unlike the movie Point Break, when they're wearing dead president masks, these guys would wear pig masks for whatever reason. So they escape in this bank robbery with $92,000. So 6 weeks after this bank robbery, this guy, Louis Dorvell, him and another guy, Gaetano Fratto, they get indicted by the FBI on stealing $300,000 worth of furs from Filene's basement on Long Island. So now Tarantino, who runs this group, knows he's got a problem. He knows Dorvell pulled the trigger. He's pissed off at him for killing this bank guard, bringing the extra heat. Now Dorvell's got a case coming with the FBI for this burglary. He knows he could flip. So what Tarantino does is he lures Dorvell to a garage. Dorvell's plan is he's going to sell this coke he's got laying around to Tarantino, and he's gone. He's just going to flee the area. Tarantino lures him to this garage, kills him, puts him in a tool chest, gets him on a boat, takes him out into the Atlantic, shoots into the tool chest, and throws it overboard. A couple of days later, the tool chest pops up. So now
that happens
DNA,
often.
Right, everybody, right. They totally screwed this up. But a little backstory on Christian Tarantino. He had ties to the Colombo and Lucchese crime family, but he wasn't a made guy. But he would do business with them. But him and his crew were making so much noise in the early 90s that John Gotti's son was looking to tax him. Because they knew they were making all these scores, so they were trying to bring them into the fold, and they're pushing back. They don't want anything to do with this. So in the meantime, this other mob associate, Peter Pistone, he gets busted for torturing animals at a dog kennel. He gives up his brother as the shooter of this guy Dorvell. He says, we went there, we shot him. My brother shot him. He gives up his brother, and he says, we dump him into the Atlantic, and that was over. He doesn't bring up Tarantino for whatever reason. He gives the story that Dorvell was murdered because he owed money to Sonny Francis, the Colombo capo over a drug debt, which made absolutely no sense. But they wind up the Pistonis wind up getting convicted for this. So in the meantime, Tarantino's got a friend, this guy Vincent Gargiulio, and his brother-in-law is Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. And Gargiulio, he's a dirtbag, and I don't think he's ever been arrested for anything big, but he was a childhood friend of Tarantino in that gang, and I guess they would lend him money, and they did business together. And he tries extorting Tarantino. He records him a bunch of times talking about the armored car robbery and the murder of Louis Dorvel, and then he tells him, I've got these tapes on you. You got to give me some cash. Well, Tarantino's not the kind of guy. He's already killed one guy, and he's involved in the murder of another. What he does is he owns these gyms, and he pays this guy, Justin Bressman. He's going to pay him $30,000, and he wants Gargiulio killed, Dee Snider's brother-in-law. So what they wind up doing is Gargiulio works in Lower Manhattan. He's a crane operator. I think he's a teamster. So Gargiulio and his friend, he's got a lookout. They go down to the construction site one morning. They got the guy's routine. And he approaches him on the street. It's almost like before the sun comes up. And Gargiulio sees him, and he's like, what are you doing down? And he goes to put down his lunch pail. And when he comes back up, Bressman shoots him in the face with a silencer-equipped pistol. Gargiulio falls down, and Bressman just vanishes. But Bressman really vanishes because after the Manhattan South homicide detectives, I don't know how they interviewed him, but they got a hold of him. They interviewed him. His lawyer got involved, said, timeout, don't want you talking to him. He vanishes. So this guy, Bill Greenbaum, the district attorney, reaches out to me, and he goes, I want you to find this guy. And I says, well, Bill, you've got Manhattan South homicide looking for him. I'm sure the FBI is sniffing around this. He goes, yeah, they are. I says, why do you want me to find him? He says, because if you find him and I could bring a case on him, the FBI can't grab him. So Bill's logic was he wanted me to grab him, charge this guy with the murder, with Manhattan South homicide. I was Bill's lucky scratch-off ticket. Like, Bill would call me to do things, but he wouldn't tell anyone else. And I would say, well, no, don't call those guys. Just see if you can find this guy. Bill kept everything very compartmentalized. So anyway, I start looking into what happens to Justin Bressman, and his father is like in the newspaper. My son's vanished. His father's telling anyone that'll listen. And Bill was of the opinion that it was a smokescreen, that Bressman took off. And Bressman lived in the Bronx, and I figured out his car was burned up in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Fire department put it out. Sanitation put a sanitation sticker on it. I think Bill subpoenaed his phone records. But it was like when he went missing, he went missing. I mean, no one had heard from this guy without a trace. So after 2 weeks, I said, Bill, I got cases piling up. I can't go running around doing this for you. I mean, you've got other people working on this. Good enough. I appreciate your time, blah, 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 blah. So I retire from the NYPD, and I'm writing one of my books. I think it was my last book, NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. And I says, whatever happened to whatever happened to Justin Bressman? So nowadays it's the internet. I start Googling things, and I find out that the FBI was able to build a case against Christian Tarantino. They were able to secure witnesses. Tarantino winds up getting convicted of the murder of his buddy, Louis Dorvel, the armored car driver, Julius Baumgart. They did not get him for the murder of Gargiulio. They got him for conspiracy to commit the murder. And to this point, no one has heard or seen, and no one knows what happened to Justin Bressman.
Wow. And what a memory, retaining all those names after all these years. That's an amazing story. Wasn't there an anonymous cassette tape of a confession or something that came in the mail to someone?
Yeah, Gargiulio, after he confronts Tarantino and tells him, I need money, I'm going to talk if you don't give me money, he sends a letter to the FBI, and he wants, I think, $500,000 from the FBI, which is like a pawn shop. Like, if you can give me $500,000, I can tell you who killed this one, and this one. So while the FBI is looking into this, Gargiulio gets killed. But what's weird is after Gargiulio gets killed, that cassette is mailed. So probably somebody close to Gargiulio, he told him, if anything were to happen to me, I want this put in the mail to the FBI. which was used. I think you guys authenticated it, and then it was used at trial.
You see that in the movies sometimes and TV shows, but obviously it happens in real life too, which is probably where the original storyline came from. That's an amazing story. And as far as you know, is Tarantino still in prison?
Yeah, and he's alive. He's got Parkinson's syndrome, and I think that he's in one of the federal prison hospitals.
Yeah, Butner, is it, Ray, North Carolina? Yeah, it's where the Unabomber died a few years ago. Wow. I'm also curious. Every once in a while, when I have dreams of going back to either my police department or another police department, and like what it would be like. I did know a few guys over the years that would come to the bureau from a PD, 2 years in the bureau. Their wife didn't like where they were assigned, went back to the PD. Here, you did your whole career, NYPD. But then you woke up one day and said, I want to be a Florida police officer. Did you have to go through the full academy down there?
No, in Florida, you have to take if you have to take a 2.5 week comparative compliance course to get your certification. Then you have to take a state exam. Once you pass the state exam, then you basically, with a resume, go to different police departments and you interview. And the police department that I interviewed, they liked what they saw. Apparently, they hired me, and then I went through. I wouldn't call it an academy, but they hired 4 of us, which I thought was funny because I was in a small class and the NYPD was 1,200.
Yes.
So just to give you an idea, it wasn't an academy. It was just you came to work every day and a different instructor would teach you something about the department. It was probably about 2.5 months.
Okay, how many sworn in that department? Just curious.
Probably about 300.
Okay, so not real small, but certainly not even 1%, I think, if I'm doing the math right, of NYPD. And just less than a year, it sounds like you stayed on board?
Yeah, a cup of coffee.
Okay, yeah, I will probably forego that plan in my life at this point in time.
Don't do it. You know too much.
Yeah, and that would probably be my my downfall. At this age, I definitely wouldn't do that. But Ray, I'm not sure you ever thought about that when you retired.
Going back into police work? Never crossed my mind. I thought, why would I? I was just today. I've been doing some work with the Pennsylvania police chiefs, and they were 6 individuals interviewing for a chief's job. And I developed the testing procedure for the inbox interviews for these guys. And I'm telling you, you listen to these guys talk, and I'm thinking to myself, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be a police chief? I mean, you know what? Great work, but it's such a thankless job. It really is a thankless job. I mean, cops don't get thanked. That's why I said, you know what? I did my time. I served my time, helping people out. I said, that's it. Time to move on to something else, But, I mean, when some of the things that you did when you look at you, and I could talk about mine too, but what would you say, Vic, was the proudest, most rewarding moment before you retired from the NYPD?
When I got promoted to detective, I always wanted to be an NYPD detective. And, my family was there. When I went through the police academy, I didn't know what was going on. It just, I'm going off to a precinct, was not seasoned, didn't really understand. Yeah, I went through the police academy, but you still, until you could do a couple of years in an NYPD precinct. And I mean, I was a Bronx kid. I don't know how kids from Long Island or upstate New York deal with it, but for me, it was a little overwhelming. But by the 10 years in, I became a detective. I knew the game. I knew what I wanted. I was working in a unit that I loved. So, I mean, for me, that was probably my proudest moment. My parents were still in good health. They came down and, it was a nice day.
Most people might think that that's not a big deal, but becoming a detective for NYPD is really, really difficult. Tell us, I mean, you got 35,000 officers. How many of those officers are detectives?
Well, during my time, it was 45,000. Probably about 5,000 detectives.
So 1 out of every 9, which is pretty impressive. And is there a gold badge? You get the gold badge as a detective?
Yeah, you turn in your 10, as we call it, and yeah, you get a gold detective shield with a new number.
Right. That's good. So after all these years, and the books you've written, what does it mean about being a cop to you? What does it mean now to you?
It's provided me a great life. It's provided me great memories. I mean, I have a pension. I'm in good health. I have health benefits, and it's health. I mean, it's still serving me. I mean, here I am 18 years later, retired, and I still, I've got my finger on the pulse as far as I'm still writing books. It's provided me with a second career. I'm lucky enough to talk to people like you on these podcasts, which I enjoy talking shop with other. I thought that once that merry-go-round stopped, that was it for me, and I still get to keep, my hands somewhat in the game a little bit.
I was talking to a couple of these chiefs today, and they said, there's two types of cops. One that's a cop for life, and the other that is just a job. And you really do see a lot of that with these guys today. It's amazing what you see. Some guys, and I'm talking to these chiefs who were on the panel doing the interviews, they can't get anybody to do anything. They don't want to work. God, this generation coming up doesn't want to work.
So like in an NYPD precinct, right? So there's 77 NYPD precincts, and a small precinct might have 100 guys, and a big precinct, a large one like in Manhattan, might have 500 cops, right? And I learned very quickly, especially I was lucky. The first precinct I went to was a dump in the South Bronx. You either were a rookie cop that didn't know anyone you got sent there, or you screwed up somewhere else. And I was surrounded by kids like myself that didn't know any better, and a lot of drunks. And I quickly figured out I'm not going to be one of these guys in the locker room that's negative about everything. Oh, what are you putting in for that for? You're never going to get that. Why would you do this? Oh my God. I made a lot of arrests, and I remember sometimes we get chided for it. Well, what are you, saving the world, kid? I'm like, no, I just think I'm doing my job. And a couple of times I left places because of that, because I just felt, you know what? I'm not, shame on me if I'm in this end of the pool, and everybody's pissing in it. I'm getting out. And that's what I did. I was never afraid to make a move if I didn't like what I saw, or I just didn't like the vibe, and there's a lot. I guess that's any line of work, but in police work for me, that was just very discouraging that people that didn't want to do their job.
Yeah.
And when you say moving, Vic, you were still in the NYPD.
Right.
It's so big you can move to different boroughs and precincts, whatever. And I know if they wanted to punish you sometimes, they put you as far away as they could in some particular precinct.
Yeah, it's called diesel therapy. So what they'll do, or highway therapy. So if you work in the Bronx and you screw up, they'll send you to Brooklyn or Staten Island. It's to really hit you with your commute time and pay tolls and sitting in traffic. So yeah, they do that all the time. That did not happen to me, but I know quite a few people that did happen to.
We probably don't have time to go over the titles of all your books, but I do love some of them. Ray, did you want to?
There's a couple questions from the audience for you, Vic, if you don't mind, if I could read them.
Here's a tease since I started it.
Yeah.
Dickheads and debauchery. Now answer the question. That's a book title.
Yeah. All right. Here's the question. What was the biggest shift you witnessed in the NYPD throughout your career?
When Giuliani became mayor, almost overnight, and basically let us do our jobs. The mayors that we had previous and the administrations in the police department, it was just don't get in trouble and don't kick up a fuss and to do the bare minimum. With Rudy, you were expected to do your job, and I respected that.
Okay. Here's another one. What was the one case you learned the most from, and why?
That Audi A6 case with because it had so many different facets to it. And I mean, we could go on and on and on. There was a burglary down in Virginia these guys pulled off. There was a homicide happened in the middle of that case. I learned working on that case that something that big, we needed help. So that case could not have been done without the Westchester County DA's office and their investigators and the New York State Police. We couldn't just do that ourselves. So I learned that even though the NYPD is the largest police department in the world, sometimes you need help outside source.
And here's the last question. What is the funniest or strangest thing that ever happened to you on the job?
There's so many. Strangest didn't happen to me. It happened to my old partner, but it's the early 90s. We were going out to cop bars, hanging out. One of the cops that worked with my friend was an amateur magician in his spare time. So we're going to the bars, talking to girls, and he's pulling the flowers out of his sleeve and pulling coins behind their ears. And I got a hold of his partner and I says, could you get him out of here? How do you compete with this? And he goes, laziest cop in the world. He says, if he took the time to do police work instead of making balloon animals for kids in the radio car, he goes, he'd be an unstoppable crime fighter. What winds up happening is a couple of weeks later, they get called down to a 6-story basement apartment on a midnight, calls for help. They get down into the basement. There's 2 doors. They bang on door number 1. No one answers the door. They go to bang on door number 2. The magician stops my buddy and says, come on, we made all this noise with our nightsticks and radios. If someone called 911, they would have come out. My buddy goes to knock on the door again. He goes, come on, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Cops are cheap. He walks out with him. What they didn't realize is behind door number 2, the super was selling coke out of the apartment. He got addicted to the coke, fell behind in his payments to his wholesaler, and he knew he had a problem because he wasn't leaving the apartment. So they did an old gypsy trick. They got an attractive female, knocked on the door, put the female's face in front of the door. When he opened the door, they bum rush him. So they're pistol whipping him. They're ransacking. Where's the coke? Where's the money? He doesn't have an answer. So they shoot him in the head. They roll him up in a carpet. They take him out of the apartment and they throw him in the furnace of the building. So while he's going up in the furnace, they go back into the apartment and they're continuing to look for the stash. That's when the magician and my buddy are outside the apartment. So they don't knock on the door and they leave. But what they didn't know was inside the apartment, they knew the cops were outside, and it was 2 Albanian guys and their cousin. And they told the girl, if the cops knock on the door, just start yelling in Yugoslavian. It was a railroad apartment. Point to the kitchen. When you get past the threshold of that bedroom, throw yourself on the floor. We're going to come out. We'll shoot the cops because now we got to commit. And then we'll take the cops out. We'll throw them in the furnace. Boy. Well, they never knocked on the door. They left. So the super is missing. His family now is calling the cops. The detectives get involved. They see there's a 911 calls for help in the basement. So they bring in my buddy and the magician. Did you notice anything? And they said, no, we knocked on this door. We didn't knock on that door. But the other guy who was a really good cop said, but the funny thing is when we were leaving, there was a car parked on a hydrant. I gave it a summons. Well, that's how they caught the son of Sam. That was the getaway car, which was registered to the female. So they bring her in, and now all of a sudden she starts giving them up, trying to minimize her, involvement, of course, but in for a penny, in for a pound. So they get the 2 Albanian guys. They figure out what's going on. They had to go back to the building, shut the furnace off for 2 days to let it cool down to get the guys' remains into the furnace. So that's a story of one of my books called Last Night, A Magician Saved My Life.
That's a great story.
Wow. That is.
It didn't happen to me, but that happened to my old partner. The guy later on in my career, that guy and I became partners.
That's a fantastic story. Wow. I would like to know, and I know Jim mentioned one of your books. What are some of your other books that you have out there? Grand
Theft Auto. I mean, if you're interested in auto theft, Grand Theft Auto is full of stories from my NYPD career working in the auto crime division. It details a car thief's mindset, what a car thief will do or won't do, what happens to your car when it's stolen, how to protect your car, layer it with protection, what to look for when you're buying a used car, different scams. Like I said, Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate is my childhood and my path to the NYPD. And all my other books are just stories, short stories from my time in the department.
The Looking Glass has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. More PD stories, I assume.
Yeah. And that's also NYPD Through the Looking Glass. That's the name of my podcast.
Right, yes.
Tell us about the podcast.
I bring on retired members of law enforcement, and we just talk shop about cases and stories. And I've also reached out to a couple of reformed, or they say they're reformed mobsters. I was lucky enough to get Vincent the Chin Gigante's daughter, Rita, on, which that was fascinating to talk to the Don's daughter. I've been lucky. I've gotten some really good guests on that podcast.
Nice.
I spent a year working OC cases in New York City and talking to the girlfriends, the wives, and the goombas. A lot of good information from them. Interesting.
Which family?
Well, let me see. I think it was Bonanno. Remember when the DA agent was killed? You
Edward
were a rookie.
Hatcher.
Edward Hatcher in Staten Island. Gus Faraci, the steroid pumped up ex-con. And then that was a full-time task force I was put on with NYPD. And we got around, we're taking pictures of the husbands out on a Friday night with their goombas. And And I didn't want to do this. To me, it's like breaking the code.
The gloves are off at that point. I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, and you show the wives the pictures, and they get all pissed off, and they go, you know what? I don't care what he does Friday night, as long as he's home Saturday morning with a pocket full of cash and takes me and the kids shopping. That's all I care about. All right, so that means you're not telling us about where Gus Ferrari may be? No, I don't know. Okay.
You know what's wild about that? I mean, I was a young cop when that happened. I remember going out to the Whitestone Pound to drop off a stolen car. And I remember going out there and I couldn't believe my eyes. And this is before DirecTV with the little satellite dishes. Remember the old days with the gambling dens? They would have the big satellite dishes where you could get bullfighting in Spain, but that was also used for gambling. And I remember going out to the pound and there had to have been 100 of them out there. And I says, what? You know, and they were like, they're busting the mob's balls. They're taking their toys. I'll never forget that, seeing all those big satellite dishes that, you know, were taken in raids of gambling dens.
Yeah, we talked about that case with a few. We had Joe Pistone on, the Donnie Brasco guy.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a mobster, but he played one in real life and in the movies, and he had some great stories there too. And some other agents who work mob stuff. It's fascinating. I'm not sure where they are now, if other ethnic groups are taking over. I'm not sure where the traditional five families are. I'm sure they're still doing something. But with other ethnic groups,
I think the Albanians fill the void with the five families as far as the gambling. The rackets that the mob was traditionally involved in, you know, their bread and butter. I don't know. And you guys would know this. I mean, with the sports gambling, a lot of it's offshore now. So they open up these websites in Costa Rica and all these places. But then that's, you know, they're getting away with that at the point where they bring the money into the United States. That's where the United States government is waiting for them.
Yeah. Interesting transition there with that stuff. Vic, you have a website that people can check out for books and podcast information, everything else?
Yeah, just go to Amazon, check out my author page, just type in my name, Vic Ferrari, like the car, and you can preview all my NYPD books for free.
I did that already earlier today, and I didn't know you had all 9. I didn't know. Yeah, I saw 3, then 4, and man, this guy is, like I said, prolific. Anything else? Any final comments or questions?
No, I think that's kind of covered it, Vic. It's been great. You got to let me know if you reach out to that guy we talked about earlier, if in fact he wants to play ball with you.
Well, I'm going to order your book. I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to read it, and then I'd like to interview you, and then I'd like to interview Fitz on your career.
Sounds good.
Works for me, and I'll gladly come on Through the Looking Glass. I like the title, and has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland, as we now know, or the Mad Hatter, or anyone like that. Again, Vic Ferrari, thank you so much. A very interesting career and a very short one, police career in Florida. A cup of coffee, as you said. Thank you again for your time here, and we'll gladly come on your podcast at some point. Everyone else out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Cold Red. Please like us, subscribe to us, check us out on Cold Pod Red Podcast. Let me start again. ColdRedPodcast.com. I want to thank Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music composer, and everyone, thanks again for listening to this episode of Cold Red.